we're discussing what I call, and I've said this I probably have said this for 3 or 4 election cycles, but I do believe this, that between Super Tuesday being over and then the election, I call it the 8 most dangerous months politically in our calendar. And it only is during a year in which there's a general election because havoc happens. You got the fiasco in Fulton County. You got, the January 6th trial now going onto the immunity issue. You got all of this stuff happening. It's not just, and then you got the international issues that we just were talking about. Ric Grenell, of course, with us. And Rick, I have said, I'm not going to claim this the first time I've said it because I've said it before, that I always view that Super Tuesday, once it's done to the election, you know who the nominees are going to be now. It's going to be President Trump and President Biden. Unless I can't imagine anything that derails that at this point. But assuming that's the case, I always say watch out for the havoc. We saw the reaction to the Supreme Court decision. The left went crazy against their own judges that they confirmed, including Justice Jackson, who is the most recent appointment to the Supreme Court, because she had dared to say that Colorado didn't have the authority. But when you look at all of these things, we know about the weaponization of the FBI. We had one of our colleagues on last week talking because we're doing those whistleblower cases. But you've been inside of government. You were the Director of National Intelligence, ambassador to Germany, worked at the UN. How do you view this time period we're in right now, Rick?
Look, what's crazy to me is just what we see from the left in terms of crushing dissent. There's literally a hesitation to have any type of debate. And when I was growing up, it was all about debate. You'd sit and listen, and you'd listen to the other side, and then there would be some sort of a coming together to say, well, we agree to disagree. That is gone now. You see that the left is attacking anyone who doesn't give the narrative that they want. The left is really, I think, breaking apart with common sense people attacking the far left. And I say this a lot, Jay, but I think one of the reasons why we're in this problem is that the media just don't play an unbiased role. They're not the referee.
Yeah.
And when they are the referee and they call out some of the crazy left situations, then we see the left kind of pull back and not do some of the crazy things that they continue to do. But we just saw Jamie Raskin, for instance, join with some really far left congressmen to say, well, we're still going to try to kick Donald Trump off the ballot through Congress. And they just have not learned their lesson. It's really crazy how radical they've been.
Harry, one of the things when you were teaching law school, and you still teach, and so do I, we used to say the way you combat speech you disagree with is more speech. The idea, the free marketplace of ideas, you're going to hear things in America you disagree with. That's the price of living in a free constitutional republic. You're going to hear things, see things you disagree with. But that's the price of living in a free country. What Rick just said, Harry, is exactly right. That is now verboten on the left.
I think that's true, but I would also go on to suggest that with respect to Mr. Raskin, he has long believed that the ends justify the means. And so anything that advances a political agenda, he is willing to use, whether it means barreling over constitutional principles. I've had a brief conversation as a law professor with Mr. Raskin, and he proved himself to be an utterly despicable person, in my opinion, 10, 15 years ago when I was teaching law in the Washington, D.C. area. He has become even more politicized as a congressman. And so he looks to individuals like Keith Olbermann, Nation Justice correspondent Eli Mistel. Both of those individuals have suggested, for instance, that the Supreme Court is corrupt, it's illegitimate, it must be dissolved.
Yeah.
Eli Mistel has suggested that the Supreme Court must be stopped. We must basically limit its power, its budget, etc. Right. So essentially, we shut down every institution in the United States that maintains and defends democracy in order to achieve what? Our political objective.
So, Rick, what's fascinating about what you said and what Harry said and this whole idea of we've eliminated discourse, the conservatives are the one who are saying let's have discourse. It's the left that's saying shut the discourse down.
Yeah, look, to say it very clearly is that it's the right that wants diversity and tolerance, and it's the left that doesn't want diversity. They want everybody to have the same voice. What I don't understand, though, Jay, is just the loss of common sense here. How does the left actually convince themselves that they're saving democracy by kicking off the political opponent? I really don't understand how they don't see that what they are doing is actually attacking democracy and taking the power of the regime that's in control and just crushing their political opponents, much like Venezuela and Pakistan and some of these countries that we have traditionally called out for their tactics.
It's interesting because there are some Republicans that have taken the same position, Andy. We talked about that, including a well-known former Judge Ludick, who's still saying he was right when 9 justices said he was wrong.
Well, of course, he had an axe to grind, and he's a resentful person, but he was absolutely wrong. And if being a judge, a former judge, he should realize that the highest court in the land has unanimously stated what the law is. And the law is what the Constitution says the law is, that the states cannot choose to make their own qualifications for the office of President of the United States. That is a congressional function. It is not a state function. Just like in the Dobbs case, it is not a federal function. It is a state function. It is reserved to the states. So it's those kinds of things that the left cannot tolerate. If you violate their party line and their belief in the way it should go, you're dead meat. That's it.
Students a couple of weeks back, and this idea of divergent views is what you're supposed to encourage. That appears no longer to be the case.
Absolutely, it's no longer the case. You talked about discourse and how we, the conservatives, are the ones that want discourse and the left is not. Well, they want discourse as long as it's only what they agree with, which is not discourse at all.
No.
You can only speak their message. You can only believe their message. And if a law doesn't agree with it, then it's not law. And if a person doesn't agree with it, they cancel you. And we see that even with their own justices. They have gone after all 3 liberal justices because they think they didn't get it right.
Hey, folks, your support of the ACLJ, though, is really critical right now. We're in our Life and Liberty drive. You've seen the cases. We just had the win at the Supreme Court. We're back up on another one right now. We've got a case that we're going to be bringing against the United Nations Relief Agency, who's funding Hamas, basically, at least through their C3. So we got all of this going on. Your support of the ACLJ is absolutely critical. I want to encourage you to go to aclj.org. Any amount you donate will be doubled. You go to aclj.org, Life and Liberty. And if you can make it a monthly gift, you become an ACLJ champion. It means you become a champion for life, for liberty, and for freedom. And that's what we're talking about here. That's the issues we're dealing with, is the fight for freedom, the fight for life, and the fight for a constitutional republic.